Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Ahmed, and in this fourth lecture we are going to talk about the King's Indian and Grunfeld structures for black. What's interesting about Reti again is that you don't need the ton and huge theory in order to face such an opening like King's Indian. If you would like to go, for example, with the main structure or like d4, c4 lines after knight c3, first of all, ideas like d5 might be super annoying, which is Grunfeld. So you need to know something after d5. And if your opponent castled now and not playing d5 and you go for e4, then d6, bishop e2, for example, the main line. Now black has not only one move that you need to take care of, which is mainly the e5 push, which is actually huge. But there is knight bd7, there is knight a6, there is bishop g4. There are many stuff to study and memorize and repeat and repeat and repeat. But why to do that? You have a very simple solution. First of all, why players choose to play King's Indian? Why not, for example, to play simply like d4, d5 in the first moves? This is something very important, very psychological understanding of the opening. d4, d5 is a very solid, but it's kind of passive. It lacks dynamical play. So searching for dynamics, black usually chooses this idea of knight f3, knight f6, c4, g6, either Grunfeld or King's Indian, but searching for active play, counter play, whatever. So after g6, I will recommend two moves. One we will get kind of deep into, one we will just mention. You could play b3, which is a very psychological strong move in order to oppose this bishop here on g7 and make his attacking plans not that effective. But our option is going to be b4. It's much more optimistic. After b4, bishop g7, we go, of course, bishop b2, castling for black. And usually when we don't know what to do with the bishop, we go g3. The idea is to go bishop g2 next. And now, Grunfeld players will tend in this position to go c6 with d5. Question, how about d5 right away? Oh, this is an interesting move. I will take cd5. If you take with the queen, thanks. You will give me time in the opening. If you take with the knight, this is great. I will take. Queen b3, my queen here is great. I could go back to b2. Knight c3 can be coming. Bishop g2, castling. And I have a majority in the center. So instead, all the time, I have this idea like d4, e4, e5, d5, etc., etc. So d5 is never an issue. And that's why normally Grunfeld players will play c6. And after bishop g2, d5, again, cd5, knight d5, it's the same as we mentioned 1 minute ago. So c takes d5 is the idea. And after c takes d5, you have a very simple, easy plan. You castle, and you use the c5. And this is why we go b4, not b3. Now, if knight c6, you have always this idea b5. So this file cannot be closed by black. And you simply go d3, knight d2, queen b3, or c2. The other rook will be coming, and you'll attack along the c file. And this is actually your main idea. And what's interesting, you always have a slide on your opponent. Black has no active play. How can you create active counter play in this symmetrical pawn structure? You can't. That's why probably you will face the d6, e5 structure. After d6, we go bishop g2, e5, and we castle. And now 2 or 3 main structures for black you have to know. Either we'll go for c6, d5 idea, or we'll go for knight h5 idea. Knight h5 can be done with 2 moves, either knight c6 or knight d7. But 2 main structures is c6, d5, or moving the knight and playing f5. Either or. So let's deal with this idea first, which is c6. Why c6? I wanted to play d5 next. Okay, not next because you cannot go d5 now. This pawn is under attack, under fire. That's why rook e8 to be played. And now in this position, I go a4, waiting for knight bd7, and then I go knight c3. Oh, wait a second. Why did you say waiting for knight d7? Why not knight c3 right away, for example? This is in order to understand this pawn structure. If you go knight c3 now, then I don't have to play knight d7. Actually, I'll go d5, hoping in the future after some moves to get the square for the knight. So I will delay my knight c3, so the bishop will keep the pressure on the e5 square, and I'll go a4, gaining more space on the queen side and kind of waiting. And after knight bd7, now and only now I go knight c3. Okay, you go knight c3. Now nothing wrong with, or nothing prevents d5, and this is the strategical idea of c6, rook e8, knight d7. So black will go d5, thinking that, okay, fine, I have the center now, I'm fine, I'm okay, but he's not okay. Pawn takes pawn, and there's this idea, knight b5, a great idea. You're threatening knight d6, so you will gain the bishop there after knight takes c8 at least. And if it's prevented somewhere, I mean, computers sometimes suggested this strange move, rook e6, but rook c1 to be coming, and then knight c7 as well is a threat. So you have practical advantage in this position. I do believe it's more than practical advantage, but you have a nice play here while black has to defend a huge problem. If he failed to defend this problem, he might failed to save his game. So this idea, I feel like it's kind of shaky, not reliable for black, and probably you will not face it. So the two other ideas, either knight c6 or knight d7. I do believe knight c6 is going to be more frequent in your games, but if knight d7, it's gonna be the same. I will go d3, and most likely black will go knight h5, hitting this or wanted to go f5 and attack on the king side. But no, whenever this move played, knight h5 or knight e8, regardless, always remember this idea of e4. This idea of e4 is annoying. Like, you cannot go a4 now, e4. Now the bishop is attacked, the knight as well. If you take the bishop, I'll take first. Attacking the two bishops, you take my rook, I'll take your rook, etc., etc. It's kind of tough. So no, I mean, whenever knight h5 came, you simply go knight c3. And there is no contact between these two bishops. I am sorry, g7 bishop, we don't... remove my number. Don't call me again. So after knight c3, f5, I will go simply e3. A good news for you, a bad news for black, there is no attack. f4 say, I will take, you'll take back, and now, as I said, there's no attack, so I have all the time in the world to go a4. And this is actually justifying my point. After a4, black has no way to continue the attack in this position. If knight e5, in order to get the bishop into the game, bishop g4, it's kind of a threat. That's why I will take, you'll take, after the deep pawn being absent, as well as for the f5 pawn. So the e4 square is super weak, and I will put my knight here forever. There's no attack, I have strategical advantage, e5 pawn is backward, and it's kind of weak. And there's no attack actually, and this knight here is just, even if you manage to do some active play on the f5, the knight is protecting everything. This knight is a monster here. This bishop is very annoying, this bishop is very strong. I will keep improving and getting more space on the queen side, and we'll crushing later on with some ideas like b6. So this is for knight bd7, and I have said that knight c6 is the main line, or I kind of pretending that it's the main line. Why? I have a reason. If we go back to the main King's Indian stuff like c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, knight f3, castling in this position, bishop e2, e5, castling. This is actually the main move order of the King's Indian defense. And the main move here for black is knight c6. And black is kind of, in his subconscious, used to the idea, okay, I will attack, and when I get attacked, I'll go back knight e7, and then I'll start my attack. Like a knight somewhere, f5, f4, g5, knight g6. That's why, let's get back to the position. That's why normally you will face this move, knight c6. And after knight c6, the pawn is attacked. I don't want to invest more time protecting. b5, gaining more space. Knight e7 back, and now in this position, I go simply d3. Knight h5 again, knight h5. We connect this move with this move. Knight h5, knight c3. I know the reason behind, but sometimes these little ideas will help you to not to make mistakes. Even in bullet chess, knight h5, knight c3. I know this. So after knight c3, f5 to be played, and now very interesting practical move, queen b3. Why queen b3? Threatening some sort of c5. And my king is, or my queen is opposing the king. Bishop e6 cannot be working because of knight g5. That's why king h8 is kind of automatic move. And now before I kind of passively waiting, I will strike in the center playing c5. And what makes this move very strong is that you cannot take the pawn. If you take the pawn in this position, I have two ideas. The simple one is knight a4, and this is what I'm going to recommend you. I want my pawn back and then knight e6 to follow, and I want the e5 pawn as well. So how to protect both of them? Good luck doing this. note that if b5, then my bishop can say hello. That's why cannot be taken the pawn. And if you go like d4, even knight d1 now is very interesting move. Now the e5 pawn is under fire, and if you go e4, then again I am very happy exchanging these two bishops. The king here is weakened, and this light squared bishop is not happy with this structure. I will move my knight to d4, and then maybe knight c3, a4, a5, later on b6. You don't have attack as the tension in the center is kind of annoying. That's why after c5, maybe h6 to be played, hoping to have bishop e6 some way, preventing knight g5, but just simply take. And now rook ac1. After rook ac1, black is continuing his hope in order to do something with this idea of g5. I will go bishop a3, attacking and pressuring the d6 pawn, rook f6, and now simply the last move in our lecture is knight d2. Why knight d2? Activating the bishop now, knight c4 in the proper time, attacking on d6 even more. You don't have attack whenever you go f4, which is probably the move that if you want to have any hope of attack, you have to play. But then I have the e4 square, and actually this is one of the main difference between the classical King's Indian and this type of structure. In the classical King's Indian, we have a pawn here on e4, and whenever we take, then there is this idea of g takes f5, and whenever f4 came, I cannot use the e4 square. Why? Because there's a pawn there. For example, in this position, a very bad move for white might be e4. Why? Because after e4, f4, I'm sad. I don't have the knight on the e4 square. My bishop kind of blocked. g4 is coming, f4 is coming. This pawn actually is defending here on e2. Like after f4, you don't have f3. My pawn is doing great job stopping this idea. And I have my own counters in this position. So this is the King's Indian / Grunfeld structure. I do believe after this knowledge that you gain, you are ready to play against the King's Indian and Grunfeld players. If you want to check more and more details about this structure and these lines, you can always check my Chessable course. The link will be in the description, and always make sure to check the previous lines. We discussed previously the knight f3, d5, c4, e6 structures and d takes c4 structures. So I hope you like what you are seeing. So don't forget to subscribe and share, and see you next.